Welcome to Women of Culture. I'm Mira T. Sundara Rajan. Join me and my distinguished guests to discover untold stories from the world of culture. Okay, so the recording is working on my end. Are you seeing?
Yeah, here too, yeah, it's recording.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you so much, Dr. Suresh Vaidyanathan. I am so pleased to have this opportunity to welcome you as a podcast guest today. And the reasons why I am excited to welcome you are many, but one of them must be mentioned immediately, which is that it is your wonderful percussion, your wonderful Ghatam playing, which has been the soundtrack for all of my podcasting activities so far over the past couple of years. And so it's a particular honor and pleasure to be able to invite you to the podcast because you have provided such a meaningful form of support to this activity. So let me start by saying thank you very much for your music as well as your presence.
Thank you, Mira. Thank you for interviewing me in this podcast and featuring me here. It's a privilege and honor, I would say, for many reasons, apart from your accomplishments in music, in your academics, and beyond. I would say you are into research of many aspects which a normal learned person would not find time or would not be too eager to treat into. So you're one person who finds time, who has passion for all these things, and the other most important reason is that you are a son of the one and only celebrated Bharati, who
Absolutely
is filling me my heart all the time. I would, if at all, one reason I would cry, complain to God about my life is that if at all, that is for not having me born in the times of Bhatia. For reasons, to enjoy his great compositions alive and also to be with him, all through his good and bad times. Because I've read much of his lifetime and other descriptions. And his own writings have described his lifestyle, his philosophy and thought process, everything. So this is my connection with Bharatiya. And there are many great people who have been living, with his spirit throughout their life. But I am one person who, the lowest devotee, I would say, of Bharatiya. So you're a person who has had the privilege, and he's having the privilege of being, his son. So I am very, very
Absolutely.
happy, very happy to be, associating with you in this aspect.
Actually, your words are so moving, Suresh. They're almost bringing tears to my eyes because the sentiment that you express of wishing that you could have lived alongside Mahakavi Bharati in order to be of help to him in his lifetime, I think it's a remarkable sentiment, and it's difficult to put into words what I feel when I hear you speak in that way, but I have to express my thanks for that. And, I would like to ask you when we begin, because some of what we're talking about may be new to some of our listeners. So just to fill in the gaps there, of course, you are referring to C. Subramania Bharati, who was a great Tamil poet, greatest Tamil poet of the 20th century, but his writing was for the ages, as has been said about Shakespeare. The same words can very well be said about Bharati. That's why he's called Mahakavi, because it is a superior achievement in the area of poetry, that Maha signifying the greatest, the supreme, the highest achievement. And of course, I'm a great-granddaughter of Mahakavi Bharati, and as you say, it's an immense privilege for me. I feel that I occupy a very special place in the world because of my connection with him, and I'm extremely proud and honored to have that connection. It is the most important thing in my life and in my family's life. So, one interesting thing about Bharati, which may be very interesting to listeners who are not so familiar perhaps with Indian culture, Indian music, and poetry, is that Bharatiyar, as he's called in Tamil, he not only wrote poetry in the sense of writing words, but he also composed music. And in fact, you can help me to make a correct statement here, Suresh, because I'm not sure that everyone in India even knows for a fact that he composed his own tunes accompanying his poems, his own melodies. So,
That's,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, you're absolutely right. This was my the most interesting surprise that hit me when I started reading Subramania Bharati's writings, probably in my during my teens. So in that particular book which I was reading, there was a ragam, or I mean a melodic scale that was
Yeah,
mentioned against every heading of the
that's
songs.
right.
So
That's
originally I
right.
was not sure. I mean, who has put this? Who has had this idea of giving suggesting a scale to this particular song? And then I somewhere else I read about Bharati himself, suggesting suggesting the tunes or the melodic scales to which it has to be tuned and sung. And probably he himself has been singing in his
Yeah,
times, and he has been
that's
teaching
right.
his children, his wife, and whoever listens to his music would also, listens to his poetry, would also listen to him, sing it in his own tunes. I would find a parallel of this to the compositions of the trinities of the Indian South Indian classical music, where the ragas or the melodic scales cannot be casually suggested by any musician who did not belong to their times. I mean,
Yeah.
who are their followers. For example, there have been many disciples of the great composers of South Indian Carnatic music, and none of the next generation musicians who have been recording their music, who have been arranging and notating their music, would not dare to suggest any other melodic scale for the songs composed by these divine composers of the
Yeah.
Southern Carnatic music. So the same, this parallel I'm drawing because whatever
Yeah.
emotions the Trinity have pumped into their compositions, I would say there's much more of that has been done by Bhartiya because he had attempted all types of emotions. It's not just devotion and prayers to God or lamentations about whatever difficulty one undergoes, or I mean philosophically, if someone laments about why this human life at all for we, those kind of lamentations may be seen in the compositions of saintly composers like Tyagaraja and others. But Bhartiya has been entirely different in his, because in his times he had to face, entirely different kind of situation what
Yeah.
his predecessors did not, come across. He had to
Yeah.
part of the freedom movement. He had
Yeah.
to have his family, which was not doing financially well. He has to be
Yeah.
updated with the immense knowledge that was around, that was there around the world, and he was probably one of the earliest persons to grasp this, the information that was available worldwide, the current information. For example, what was happening in the politics of Russia or in Europe,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and the revolutions that were happening.
Yeah.
He was in currency. He was getting information. I do not know. The technology was not as updated as now. And he
Hmm.
was updated with every information, and he was able to comment on it in the very
Yeah.
most intellectual way. He was able to argue with people in the best intellectual way and come
Yeah.
with solutions and conclusions, which was amazing. So I mean, all this whatever that was going in his mind, he was able to bring them, put them down in poems, which was not
Hmm.
the case with the composers who were more into composing Carnatic or the classical compositions. So, Subramania Bharati has definitely been on a much higher plane, was more with the society, was more with the reality. He was with more with reality, more with the concern of the common man, and he was catering to their needs, or he was really concerned about what the human needs are, and he was there with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, I think it's an extremely interesting point that you're making because it's true. On the one hand, I think it's absolutely correct to say that Bharati was following in the line of these other great composer poets in the Indian tradition, which I
Yes.
think is where you started out, drawing a very apt comparison between him and the Carnatic Trinity as it is known, and which we are going to speak about much more in a few moments, I'm sure. But there is that sense of continuity. But at the same time, you're absolutely right that there was a historical mission underlying Bharati's existence, not only his work,
True.
that was just of such immense magnitude. Now it's I think we still understand at an intellectual level how significant the Indian independence struggle was, but I don't think we can really grasp the magnitude of it anymore. We have to try to use our own historical imagination and take ourselves back to those times and just think about, how downtrodden India was at the time, how powerful the British Empire was. They controlled a huge majority of the world, the
True.
seas and the land. And what they didn't control directly, which was already in a minority of territories, they did control through alliances and allegiances. So it was the most powerful, all-inclusive, in not in a good sense, all the most powerful, the most comprehensive imperial power that has ever existed.
Mhm.
And on the other hand, there was Bharati, this an individual situated in South India. He came from a place like Ettayapuram. Ettayapuram in those days was a little bit more on the map than today, for sure. But still, it was a small but important center of Tamil culture. And very quickly, his writings became inflammatory from the government's point of view. So you mentioned that Bharati had struggled a lot with poverty and his family had not been well to do. I mean, in fact, they I know from hearing the recollections of my family members and so on that rice was in a shortage in the house on a regular
Mm.
basis.
Yes, yes.
And Bharati had a mind that could not tolerate any kind of pettiness or penury. He had a rich, wealthy mind and character. So the words, there is no rice in Tamil, arisi ille, those
Mm.
words were not to be said in the house. So instead, he created a rhyme that could be used to signify. I don't know if you're aware of
Mm.
this, but
No.
instead of saying arisi ille, they'll say ahara mihram.
Ahara Mihara. Aha.
Ahara mihram, which to the present day, suppose we run out of rice, which would here it's a simple matter of not managing to go to the grocery store on time. So times have changed by God's grace in that regard. But we never say the words in Tamil that there is no rice. We always say ahara mihram in our house. So this is the situation, and why it was that way. It wasn't some sort of accident or some sort of uh, desire on the poet to forbear from amassing worldly wealth or anything. There are all kinds of myths about him, but a very simple reason: he was a writer, and his writing was outlawed. How was he supposed to make a living?
Absolutely. Yep.
Very
He,
simple.
I see. He was also employed in many, dailies and
Yeah.
magazines.
That's
He
right.
was an editor. He was a chief editor. He was
He's a
contributing.
journalist.
Yeah, he was a journalist
Yeah.
contributing to I mean, as a scribe. But the point is,
Yeah.
if as you rightly said, if he was banned to perform his profession, then where is the source of income? And
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot
Exactly.
expect him to go to a regular office and do some clerical job and make some money
Mm.
just because he needs money. And he
Mm.
was an absolutely a phenomenal creative person who,
Mm.
I mean, as an artist, I know the amount of pride and ego has to be very high for any creative person, which is definitely his driving force. We also speak about humility of someone who is creative, but I
Mm.
mean, personally, I feel that there has to be an optimum percentage of pride in a creative person, which actually drives him, to do his best. So Bharati uh, had this pride, and I mean, I have read about him even to ask for a support, financial support for a temporary reason, temporary time from someone. He would command this friend of his to support him. He will not put it humbly. He had this authority to command and say, "I need this money. You need to take care of me." I mean, this is how he conversed. I mean, he had this pride about his presence and what people. I mean, he insisted that he needed support. As a matter of regard from the society.
Yeah, to tie together some of the threads we've been discussing. You talked about him as a modern composer, and I want to just take that angle because that is not spoken about very much. And I think some of the points you're making here are related to that because he was a journalist by profession. He was a
Yes.
writer. And it is through the exercise of that, and I must say, very distinguished profession where a lot of writers, especially modern writers, have acquired very good training.
Hmm.
He was arguably one of them, and he came to know about what was happening all over the world. And there was a wonderful synergy that operated because his mind was a mind that didn't know any borders. So it was
True.
capable of ranging freely across the full limitless scope of both of his imagination and of the things that he read. His reading was incredibly wide in multiple languages, and these world events that he learned about and was deeply implicated in as a freedom fighter as well.
Mhm.
So, as you were pointing out, many of the songs that he wrote were about events in the world and in India, about the great personalities of the national movement. And, in addition to the spiritual, also religious songs,
Amazing. Yeah.
philosophical songs,
Mhm.
there's really no subject on which he has not written.
Touched.
And I
Yeah.
think that ultimately is what Mahakavi means. That's why we can talk about him in the same breath as someone like Shakespeare and, be serious about that comparison. Because in every language, there are only a few artists like this who manage to achieve a certain comprehensiveness in their understanding of human life. And he was definitely one of them. அங்கோர் வெற்பு நொறுங்கி பொடி பொடியானது வெலவா. So then to go back to the musical aspect,
Mm.
which I think because you had mentioned some things that were so interesting there that I would like you to comment some more on because you're very perceptive to notice the ragas indicated by him and to delve into that issue of who provided that and so on. So I can tell you
Mm.
the history behind that is that he would compose a song by singing it.
Mm.
And there are eyewitness accounts, both from within and beyond the family. But within the family, he had an upstairs in the house where they were living in Pondicherry in exile in French
Mm.
India.
Mm.
And he would go to the upstairs and you could hear him singing, stamping his foot in time
Mhm.
to mark the talam of the song. And he would compose like that. And then he would come to the house and teach that song to his wife, Chelama, who he considered to be his equal partner in the business of his poetry, in the work of his poetry. And they would teach the daughters. So the second daughter, Shakuntala, was quite young when he died. But I do believe that she still learned to sing. But my grandmother, Tangamar, was older. And I know for sure, for a fact, that she learned the songs from her mother and from the poet himself. And then she taught her children. So Tangamar Bharati was the mother of the person that you have referred to, as well as my mother, Vijaya Bharati. Yeah, that's right. So there, I won't comment on the information that you gathered from my cousin and my aunt. But I can comment authoritatively on the information that I have from my side, which is that my mother, who was a great Bharati scholar, was extremely concerned that Bharati's own way of composing his songs should be preserved for future generations. And in fact, this was something that, Suresh, it's one of the great challenges or paradoxes of the Indian situation, which I find it so painful at a certain level, because Indians have great cultural pride. But at the same time, I think that the experience of colonialism took away some of the awareness of preserving one's own culture and honestly putting it on a pedestal where some of these things should be. Very simple, like you described, when it comes to Saint Tyagaraja's compositions, especially the Pancharatnams, which are through composed music, as I understand.
True.
You're right. You cannot go, another musician, no matter how great the person may be, you cannot go and change that.
Definitely.
So when it comes to Bharati, I think that mentality is not there.
Yeah.
He is the poet of the people. He is a popular poet, which has the plus side that he is popular and loved, but there is also a dark side. And the dark side being that you do not understand sometimes the value of that thing, how precious it is, and how it must be kept apart. He is not a man that anyone can just relate to. I am his great granddaughter. His blood flows in my veins. But I will not say I can speak for Bharati. I cannot do that. Nobody should do that. And I think that awareness is sometimes missing. So, for whatever reason, if this is a factor, maybe not realizing the full extent of his talent, also in the musical area. I have heard Carnatic musicians say to me that his compositions are not Carnatic enough to be featured on Carnatic stage. I'm sure you will have some comments on that.
Definitely. Certainly. You definitely have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why, such comments come from Carnatic musicians is that, they have kind of a very closed approach, I would say. It's a blindfolded following of certain principles that have been handed over to them, or certain beliefs that have been handed over to them by their, predecessors, seniors, and gurus. There is a term called Vageyakara, the person who composes lyrical poem has to also notate it. I mean, if not with a paper and pen, I mean, he has to notate it with all the musical notes appropriately, fixing on every phrase or every syllable. And then he has to set rules and regulations as to what are the improvisations that can be made at every step of singing this. I mean, the Carnatic music songs, they have a structure by themselves, and this structure is believed to have been created by the composer himself. I mean, as a orderly notated format. Okay, so this form is being practiced and then preserved and then handed out to the next generation, who also have to meticulously follow the tradition. I mean, this is the belief, I would say. But how much? I mean, the same persons who comment about the Carnatic stature or the Carnaticism of Bharatiya's music, how much they have gone into what the structure of his music, or all they want is someone some material, some written material of using this particular swara here, this particular note here, and the flow has to be like from the lower note to the upper note here, and I'm making it more colloquial in my description. I don't want to be
Yes, of course.
too technical about it. So what they want is a clear description or clear notated format of how a Pallavi has to go, or the first part of the song, second part of the song, kind of the progression, how it has to go, things like that. So this Bharati, you cannot expect this from Bharatiya, but Bharatiya, his mission was different. But why? With a mission or with a multifaceted approach or multifaceted, presence in his times to take care of many things in the society. Here, I would digress and comment about many Tamil scholars of his times, because I have spoken about and
Sure.
written about Bharatiya in one of my articles. There were
Yes.
great Tamil scholars who lived in his same times. For example, I will mention a particular musician, Vage composer Gopalakrishna Bharati.
Oh,
You might have heard of this
yeah,
another great composer
definitely.
who lived in the times of Bharatiyar, and who had composed a great opera called Nandarar Charitram, based on one of the 63, Saivic saints. Okay. This Gopalakrishna Bharatiya was also living during the times of British Empire and would have seen all the atrocities going around. But he confined himself to be only a musician, a composer, and a Vagekara, and only cared about how his poetic abilities recognized and being practiced and taken to the future. He was, that was his musicianship alone was his concern. And whatever happening next door, if the British police come and torture his next door neighbor, he would not have bothered, because there is no record of any other artist, composer, or scientist. Take any profession for that matter. Very few of them have you know utilized their poetic abilities or their knowledge or their academic qualification to be part of the freedom movement or to go in support of the society which is suffering. So Bharatiyar's intentions was not to become a Vagekara of notating his compositions and having a lineage of disciples, and for them to carry it over to the next generation, so that the current generation musicians who comment saying that his music is not Carnatic. This is absolutely absurdity, I would call, if they say that this
Yeah.
is not Carnatic, because someone who was a complete Carnatic musician who could sing his own compositions in the proper Carnatic way, and there have been eyewitnesses who have recorded all these. And
Yes.
if at all they had the mind, or if, even now if they have a mind, to go into why this particular raga was chosen for this song, and how it could, out of imagination, out of proper observation and understanding of the song, any Carnatic musician can recreate what would have been in Bharatiya's mind of the Carnatic notated structure. So notating is not, frankly speaking, even Tyagaraja Swami or Swami Dikshidhar would not have taken a paper and pen or even a palm leaf to notate their own compositions. It is the disciples and grand disciples would have, maybe even after they had passed away, from whatever they have collected as a Shruti. This is how they say, like Vedas
Yeah.
getting transmitted through by hearsay, by hearing.
Yeah.
So whatever they have heard and registered in their minds, they would have brought it back into the into writing, into putting them down
Yeah.
in black and white. So this would have been possible even with Bharatiya, if
Yeah.
not 100 years
Based
back.
on
But this is possible even today.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think the term that just came to mind was oral tradition.
Oral
That
tradition. You're right. You're right. You're right.
yeah, we call it an oral tradition in the
So,
family of
yeah.
Bharati's poems because he taught it himself to the family members. So we get
Yes.
it directly from him through the oral tradition.
So perfect. So he was following the tradition of what the Trinities have been doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just for the reason that you don't have a notated format of his music. I do not know. It was also available. It did not reach our hands. You would have attempted even.
Mm.
So this is the right attempt something of teaching his music. I mean, first notating his music properly in the melodies in which he wanted them to be sung, and then teach them to the next generation and take it on further.
Yeah. Yeah, you're raising a number of really interesting points, because I think you're absolutely right in terms of the kinds of pressures under which he was living. We mustn't forget that, where he was literally a fugitive from the government at one point in
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
unjustified in many in a sense as well, but anyway, because the British did not respect free speech in India, so that was the
yeah,
practical situation. But I think you're so right to point out that it's a question of philosophy or philosophical approach as well, because he had a certain kind of agenda, if I can put it that way, which was just like you've described, that he did want to cast his vision and his intelligence towards everything that he saw happening around him in a very comprehensive way,
yes.
and to comment on that, to give voice to the people who had no voice, to give voice to the causes that had no voice.
I cannot name a particular person, a great poet who originated from India, who was living in the times of Bharatiya, not in the south but in the north. You can very well find out who this great poet was. He
Mm,
had all this support and privileges that the British government could extend to him in the best possible way. He was recognized internationally, globally, as an Indian
mm,
composer, Indian poet. Okay, he had an elite life. He also had personal sufferings, but he had an elite life. He was part of the elite society and regarded as one of the greatest poets of India. But Bharati did not choose that path. He could
yeah,
have, if he wanted. He wanted to be one among the common man and someone who is a mouthpiece, no, not just a mouthpiece, who can be an emotional, speaker or someone who can put forth the emotions of a common man in the best possible way through his writings and through
yeah.
his speeches.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, if I can even take that beautiful thought and express it slightly differently, because yeah, I don't think it was just a question of wanting to be close with the common man, but I think there was something even deeper involved there, which is that he saw the dignity and the beauty of the life, the
yes,
so-called common life
yes,
of
yes,
South India in particular, and he
yeah,
saw that as the life divine. And the people there were the raw material of the divine personhood and the achievement of great things.
correct.
It was a continuity for him, and so he saw them as being worthy of raising them up to be representing the culture. So that's what I mean when I say I think he wanted to give a voice to people who deserved it, who deserved self-respect, and dignity and the enjoyment of their own culture at a time when the British had come and literally just taken all of that away. So it's the kind of contribution he made. It's something, I feel tears coming to my eyes as I'm speaking, because I think it's such a moving thing, and it's not an ordinary kind of contribution that somebody can make. It's not even an ordinary artistic contribution, if such a thing exists.
Yeah, yeah,
So to go back to your point though about the music, I think that's right. He wasn't somebody who came from an elite background and wanted to be representing the elite. He was somebody who wanted to represent the whole of humanity
yeah.
and be one with the whole of humanity. And so you're right, his musical compositions and his poetry as well, it reflects that in the sense that he chose to express himself with the utmost simplicity, with
Mm,
elegance, almost like maybe kind of a more Japanese Zen Buddhist aesthetic, you could
true,
say.
true, true.
I recently had an opportunity to see two of the greatest Zen Buddhist paintings that have ever been created. They were
Mhm,
displayed side by side, paintings called Persimmons and Chestnuts.
mm,
For the first time I think ever outside Japan, they were displayed side by side in a museum here, and I got to see them. So I'm
mm,
thinking a lot about that. But that idea of the simplicity, the closeness to people, closeness to nature, I
mm.
definitely see that in Bharati. So you're right. We can see that there is a simplicity, but it's a deceptive simplicity at the same time, because the depth of what is clothed in that simplicity, the greatness of the thoughts, the philosophy, the depth of his reading and meditations on the culture and on
Yeah.
the history, and his spiritual vision, his inner vision as a seer, that's all there, in that beautiful, simple, elegant form, whether it's the language or the musical form. So
No
just to
one,
agree with, yeah,
yes, no one has uh, been as proud as Bharatiya about the culture, about his,
yeah,
his
correct,
culture. And
100%.
also, there is none who has shown as much as anger against the faltering people of the Indian community. I mean, be it from
Hmm.
elite or
Yeah,
even the common man, for his non-responsiveness to the call of the nation, or for his
mm,
letharginess, or for his slavery. Slavery mind.
yeah,
No other point of his times, or even later or before, has been openly critical about. I mean, he was even critical about the moderates. At one point of
yeah,
time, he was criticizing his own co-freedom fighter, who was too soft in his approach to revolt against the British. Um,
absolutely,
Very, very
absolutely,
truthful to his thoughts. He never faked his whatever that was in his mind. Even love, I would say, take even
yeah,
be it love or anger or all sorts of emotions. He was very truthful to them. I mean, he did not
yeah,
hide anything. He did not fake. So that
yeah,
was the gift of Bharatiya. I mean, more than a musician, stand out from. I remove my garb of my musicianship, or I see. I see Bharatiya, as a great guide for the humanity.
hmm,
A
hmm,
trendsetter guy. To be upright in what you say. I mean, why do you want to be camouflage your views and make it applicable to someone's taste. I mean, if I want to build myself or shape myself, my career, uh, this is how I should do.
yeah,
Take the example from Bharatiya. Well,
yeah,
this is
absolutely.
what I would have probably you might have known this great person called Patinathar. The uh,
Yes, of course.
greatest poets of the
Great Tamil
previous
poet. Yeah.
Tamil poet. He was one of the richest business community he belonged to in the times of Cholas. Their family contributed were giving loans to the king of that time. To that extent they were rich. But in just
Mm,
one moment's thought or one second's thought, he just relinquished everything and came out of his house wearing just a loincloth, and became a saintly person. I mean, it started. Poems were flowing out like anything from his mouth, and he became a
mm,
saintly composer. In
mm,
one of the incidents in his life, he was sitting, waiting for alms. He served to him. And when someone suggested that you cannot do this, you have to go in search of alms and go into people's doors and ask for one. He said, no, this body needs a little food which can wait. If the food comes to my lap, where I am sitting,
mm,
I will take. I will not go in search of food. That is not that this body is not born for that. I mean, I'm quoting this
mm,
exact example because Bharati
mm.
has
Amazing.
defined by this character. I tell you, I mean, that man has relinquished his wealth, but here, despite his poverty, despite his the situation in his family, he carried his personality in such a very respectable way.
May I suggest the term self-respect or
Self-respect.
integrity?
That's a self-respect.
Those,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, those may give a
You're
good
right.
flavor of what you mean. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
think
yes. He was very concerned about
there's
his
no
self-respect.
shortage of ego in the world today, unfortunately. Although you're talking about positive manifestations of
Positive
ego,
manifestation. That's
absolutely.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a little bit troubling to me that I listen to you speak, and I know that for many people, the character that you're describing will be surprising to them, or something that they cannot comprehend as being
And
a way of life anymore. So I hope that what I'm saying is not true, and that people somehow can relate to what you're saying, because
true.
it's extremely important.
And you
And
look at the sorry about
yeah,
interrupting. Your
oh,
I
please
mean
go.
his wife and his children. Imagine how much they were with him. You know, all through his emotions. Whatever he wanted to do, they were with him. You know.
Well, now I have to interrupt you. And
Okay.
what you're saying is so important that I have to say something about this, because you're absolutely correct. And if you look at what he wrote, especially about his wife, because the girls, he had two daughters, so they
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
younger, but his
Mm,
wife was standing beside him. And when the children grew up, they were standing beside him too, but the wife was standing beside him the whole time. And
absolutely.
this is one of the great I think injustices that has happened in South India in particular is in the public portrayal of
Mm,
Bharati's family, especially his wife, as someone
mm,
who was sort of I mean, I hate to use this expression because I don't like it, but for lack
mm,
of a better way of saying, a kind of conventional South Indian housewife,
mm,
and somebody who was looking for an ordinary life when Bharati was not in a position to provide it. And this is completely wrong. I'm
mm,
thinking, for example, about the movie that was
mm.
made about Bharati's
Yeah,
life. I
yeah, yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's a
Mm,
few decades ago now. I don't know if people still care about it, but at the time,
mm,
it was very troubling to my mother. So my mother was brought up by her grandmother and mother. So
mm.
she knew Chellama Bharati personally. She was the
Oh,
person who brought her up.
mm,
And it was her life's mission. She only had a few,
mm,
but one of those missions was that the public perception of Chellama Bharati should be corrected, and people
mm.
should understand what a great character,
Yeah.
a visionary character, a feminist she was, very much shaped by her husband's poetry, which
Mm.
she all knew by heart, by the way,
Aha.
Manapadama, by
Mm,
memory.
ചുട്ടും വിളിച്ചുടർത്താൻ കണ്ണമ്മാ സൂര്യചന്ദ്രരോ കണ്ണമ്മാ ചുട്ടും വിളിച്ചുടർത്താൻ കണ്ണമ്മാ സൂര്യചന്ദ്രരോ വട്ടക്കരിയ വിളി കണ്ണമ്മാ വട്ടക്കരിയ വിളി കണ്ണമ്മാ.
So I'm very happy that you make this point. I feel like I'm doing the rounds, telling people about these things.
mm,
My mother spent her whole life doing that. But when I hear someone from outside the
mm.
family, a scholar and an artist like yourself, saying this, then I feel hopeful that actually, there are learned people, and the word is getting out about the truth.
No, absolutely.
Which is important.
I mean, at every available, opportunity, we need to definitely rise up and try to correct things which have been wronged,
Yeah,
and especially about
absolutely.
very particularly about someone like a phenomenal person like Bhatia.
Yeah, the great figures. It's our duty to preserve their memory as much as we can. I completely agree. if we can turn to the question of music again, and Bharati's music in particular, actually, we're not diverging that far from our conversation, but there was something very interesting there that I wanted to ask you about, because you talked about the way in which Bharati's general philosophical approach infuses his approach to music. And I think that was very insightful. My mother was a great singer of Bharati songs. She was a trained Carnatic singer and a brilliant singer, but she was an especially outstanding singer of Bharati songs for a very simple reason, which is that she prioritized the words, and her standard of Tamil was outstanding. And just, simply even listening to her pronunciation of Mahakavi's words, people said about her, oh, she speaks like Bharati must have spoken Tamil, and she deserved that. But but emphasizing the words, I think, is what brought a special dignity to her singing, a special quality to her singing.
True, true. Every single syllable, was full of life. He's full of life. This is for eternity. So definitely, who else could have been a right person or the most suitable one to sing? He has been singing through her probably.
Yeah. Well, she would be the first person to agree with you about that, and she had total abandonment of self in her singing. You could see and hear that. But I think that points to something else, which is quite interesting too, because obviously the discussion we've been having about Bharati so far, I think it paints the picture of a great innovator on many levels. And this question always interests me so much in relation to South India, especially in the area of music, because I think I have been exposed to the current trends in Carnatic music for a long time, because my family used to travel regularly to Chennai to see the Chennai Festival and so on, even before it was as developed as it is now. And so I was very lucky to have that exposure. But I think that as far as I can see, musicians in South India put a lot of emphasis on innovation. And and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Feel free to contradict me if you see this differently. But as far as I can tell, they're looking for ways to make their performances innovative and to keep bringing in audiences, including new audiences. But in that process, some of the things that they do are experimental. So, for example, I see a lot of collaborations between Indian musicians, from different parts of India, that so-called Jugalbandi, for example, between Hindustani and Carnatic musicians. I see also a lot of collaborations between musicians from outside India, so folk musicians, jazz musicians, and so on, even pop and rock. Even someone like Ravi Shankar, the great sitarist in the North Indian tradition, he collaborated with pop musicians, and his goal was to bring greater visibility to Indian music. He has said that. So I wonder if there's a bit of an irony here, because I think Bharati was definitely an innovator in music as in poetry, as in everything.
Yes.
And that explains some of the originality of his compositions, the style in which they're written, how he uses the ragas, and so on. So, why is it that type of innovation has not been embraced by the Carnatic music community, and is there hope for that?
Very nice question. It's there's a very simple answer I can give. The reason for collaborations are not really experimental, in the sense that expecting something to, find something, discover something for the future. You are also touching upon drawing more audience, new audience. Yes.
Yeah.
There's a need for enhancing the number of audience in the theaters nowadays when Carnatic music is sung. Also, this applies to Hindustani music. Barring a few musicians who have somehow clicked with the audience taste, most of the concerts they fail to draw crowd. But at the same time, not everyone is into experimenting, and not everyone can be successful in experimenting. Those who claim to be experimenting and trying to create some better atmosphere, also do not successfully do it. The reason for all these things is that they don't have a mission of, you know, digging out some hidden treasure and bringing it to the public, like what we were discussing about,
Yeah.
bringing out Bharati's, compositions in their original musically tuned
Yeah.
format. Okay, this is one example. There can be many examples. Like there have been composers who have been totally forgotten. There have been
Yeah. Sure.
women composers who have composed hundreds and thousands of Carnatic music songs, and for want of recognition even within the family, they have been dumped and left uncapped. Those things, those compositions, if the so-called experimenting musicians want to bring out, they can bring out and do it very comfortably on a Carnatic music platform. I mean, right from the 40s, I would say, where many films, music, many movies have been made
Yeah.
connected with freedom movement, and
Yeah.
the easiest, lyrical compositions available to feature were Bharatiya's, because
Yeah.
full of the content was ready, and the music
Yeah.
directors,
That
yeah,
started with the first movie, the Mother India.
yeah, that's right. The
Yeah.
point is, in some way, they did good by turning the attention of the common man to the great compositions of Bharatiya, but only to some extent, because they were picked up a few songs which suited them, and then featured them. I mean, setting them to their own taste, and that will attract the viewers. So that was their point of view. I mean, beyond that, they did not attempt to go to experiment on Bharatiya's other compositions. Same way, Carnatic musicians, picking from what the cinema world has done, the Carnatic musicians have also been picking up songs from his Kannan Patu or Koil Patu here and there, one or two, and setting their own tune to them and singing them as a miscellaneous item at the end of the concert, which was a
Mm.
very big injustice, I would call, in two ways. One is that they were setting into tunes which were not Bharatiya's own, and also many times, I mean, as a true listener, I would really ditch them into the bin, because the way, but for the words, the words were so energetic and emotional, full of life, and because of the tunes they have been put into, and they have lost their life. The words have been made to die because of the wrong tunes. But Carnatic musicians are very comfortably singing, because if one GNB sings, if one Ariyapudi sings, if one Madurai Maniya sings Bharatiya songs, it is not Bharatiya who is seen there, it is only Madurai Maniya or GNB. Okay, GNB is singing Bharatiya song, let me listen to it. So that, I mean, even GNB has not done justice, I would say, to Bharatiya's song, because he wanted one Tamil song to be featured in this miscellaneous list. So he picked up Bharatiya's. He picks up one Tevaram or Trivachakam, or this one Margari, what is it? Tirupavai, Tiruvambavai.
Yeah.
He also picked up Bharatiya's, but which is not a fair treatment to the great composition. That is where all these musicians are good. So trying to, whatever collaboration they want to do with either North Indian musicians or Western musicians, there are a lot of other things to be done. If I do, like, I'm also into a lot of jugalbandis. I do a lot of
Sure.
experiment. I mean fusion work, but the intention is not to create something. I mean, frankly, I accept that we are just entertainers there. We don't bring. I try to bring in my best of my classical Carnatic content,
Yeah.
and to fuse it with, or make a cross cultural presentation of my thoughts in this
Yeah.
jugalbandi or a fusion stuff. But
Yeah.
finally, we end up doing only some kind of entertainment where both sides are compromising, both sides are trying to, do some kind of you challenge me, I challenge you, let's be friends, kind of,
Mm.
it's a matter of 90 minutes to 2 hours of entertainment. People,
Mm.
you even serious audience, you turn them into non-serious ones by performing some common stuff which is already very familiar to them. There you do
Mm.
not, very distinctly show this is one school of thought, and that is another school of thought, and exclusive. What is exclusive to us? What is common to us? And how we compromise on certain things? How we try to imbibe the other person's best, and to
Yeah.
to give my own interpretation of that. All these things do not happen seriously in any Jugalbandi concert. I would even say this about some of the greatest musicians who have done Jugalbandis in the past. Many of them are dead now, but all of them
Mm.
entertaining the people for a while. And sometimes what happens is someone like Balamuli Krishna, who would,
Mm.
outdo all the other participants on stage. So at the end of the day, or at the end of the concert, everyone will fall at his feet saying, "Oh, you are the greatest," and that ends the
Mm.
matter. So there is no cross cultural or cross philosophical, or I mean school of thought sharing, or I mean fusing of ideas happening there at all. I mean, no, the best, the main reason for that is not giving enough space to the other person to come out with his best,
Mm.
or to allow him to speak out. In
Mm.
a conversation, you should allow the other person also to speak out, and then,
Mm.
I mean, you give your own thought. This is not happening. This conversation point, I mean, concept is not happening at all. I am doing many shows, but few of them try to rise up to this level, this expectation of
Mm.
taking in the others, respecting the others' musicianship, and coming out with something new. This is but such experiments. I would say they're not uh, um, not becoming successful with the purpose for which they are done. That I'm very sure about.
Yeah, it's again, I think, an extremely important point, because we have been having a conversation about some very important cultural matters, and I don't
Yeah.
think either of us is interested in stifling innovation or creativity. Quite the opposite.
Yes.
What I hear you saying, and what I feel very passionately myself, is that I want to see the creativity flourishing. And you put it so beautifully, that there is an enterprise to be undertaken here in terms of the conversation between musical cultures, and that it is an enterprise that is in its infancy, to say the very least. Very, very little has been accomplished at the level where it should be happening. So that's potentially is an exciting area of innovation. But how do we reach that level? That's a great challenge. That to me, there's a very personal aspect to that as well, because for myself, as a person of South Indian parentage, obviously born in Canada and trained in Western classical music, because my parents felt, in those days. Now it seems like everywhere you go, you can find masal dosa and sambar,
Mm,
and
mm,
the Tamils are very well known in that
mm,
sense, and the culture is gradually getting a foothold, even in places like Canada and the US and so on. But at that time, we were a handful of Tamil families in the city where I was growing up. And
mm,
my parents wanted me to have access to culture, to musical
mm,
training, and so on. So they put me in piano lessons, which then, of course, it has become one of the great passions of my life. But I always felt that there were two parts of me. The part of me that had learned the Western classical tradition and was steeped in that tradition, and
mm,
then the part of me that was listening to Bharati songs and my mother's wonderful singing. Literally from before I was born,
mm,
from inside, in when I was in utero, I was already listening to Bharati songs.
mm,
But how could I reconcile or not reconcile, but what was the relationship of those two things to each other, is something that I really never understood. They
mm.
were two parallel
Yeah.
lines. It was only when I got to travel to India on a regular basis, an
Mm,
opportunity made possible by my parents,
mm,
who decided to move back to India at one point and kept an apartment in Adayar and so on. So I got the benefit of that, because I got to go listen to music regularly and be part of the environment there. And then
mm,
gradually I came to see that actually it is not two parallel lines.
mm.
Music is an ocean. Music is
Yes.
music.
Mm.
and it cannot be two parallel lines. But the conversation between those two different traditions is something that is undeveloped, undeveloped in me personally for a long time. Fortunately, I'm blessed to be able to continue with my studies, learn from my association with great people like yourself. So the learning is continuing, and what was broken up and discontinuous is now being made whole again. It's a great experience. But that